Welcome to another edition of First and North. I'm your host this week, Lily Zhao, out of Fox 6 in Milwaukee. It's been a fun week of sort of inter-NFC North matchups here, and let's bring in my esteemed panel of guests here. We have Lou Canellis in Chicago, Dan Miller in Detroit, and Ahmad Hicks in Minneapolis. And guys, it was a fun week of Packers Lions on Thanksgiving, and then you have Bears and Vikings on Monday Night Football. Let's start first with the game that we just saw. Bears, Vikings. Lou, I'm going to start with you. Matt Eberflus, 0-9 against the NFC North coming into that game. How good does it feel, number one, to get a win in the division, and number two, to do it without scoring any touchdowns?
I'll tell you what, how good does it feel? We are making plans for a Super Bowl parade in the middle of the city of Chicago. Listen, you touched on it. Matt Eberflus, Ryan Poles, the general manager. This is their first NFC North victory. I'm talking in 2 years. These guys have been around. For Justin Fields, he hadn't won an NFC North game since October of 2021, and he had a game-winning drive. And they did it, as you touched on, Lily, without scoring a touchdown. First NFL team this season to win a football game without scoring a touchdown. Bears hadn't won a football game without scoring a TD since 1993, where Dan Miller, you'll love this, Jim Harbaugh was quarterback at that time, Dave Wanstead was head coach, and Kevin Butler won it for the Bears. It is a glorious day in Chicago where Bears fans can celebrate, and not only can they celebrate up till Sunday, they can celebrate an extra week because the Bears are now on the bye week.
Well, going from elation to kind of disappointment in Minneapolis, Ahmad, what's going on with the Vikings? I'm sure this locker room is pretty stunned losing to the Bears, especially at home, and it's kind of been tough with home field advantage for you guys this season.
Yeah, you know, they have not played well at US Bank Stadium, and there were a lot of heads being hung in that locker room following the game. Josh Dobbs won. For example, he just sat at his locker just tapping his foot on the floor for about 15 minutes following that game. You could tell he was visibly frustrated. Jordan Addison, who had several plays that he probably should have made, one led to be an interception. He was sitting at his locker with a towel over his head, and he was thinking about those plays that maybe cost the Vikings the game. So it was just another game where the offense let down the defense. I don't know how you lose a game when the team didn't score a touchdown. I mean, that's really bad, and that's going to be a sour 1.5 weeks that they have to let that sink in, you know, before they get back on the field against the Raiders. So, you know, a lot of disappointment. The Pastronaut has came back down to earth, and now everyone is trying to figure out who's going to play quarterback for the Vikings now.
And I'll touch on that with you later, Ahmad, but I want to get to Dan here quickly. Dan, you guys full on turkey? Are you recovering from that Thanksgiving Day beat down from the Packers? How are things in Detroit after that loss to Green Bay?
Yeah, I think the Packers came in and ruined some Thanksgiving dinners. There's no doubt about that. It was, credit to Green Bay. They came in, jumped on them right away. First play of the game, 50-plus yard pass down the field, and the Lions were on their heels the rest of the day. And it kind of, we've seen this Lions team play well, and we've seen this Lions team struggle. When they struggle, they turn the ball over. In this game, they turned the ball over. When they were 1-6 last year, they were turning the ball over. When they were 8-2 at the end of last year and 8-2 to start this year, when they play well, they take care of the football. And there's obviously things they have to deal with there. Dan Campbell came out on Monday this week and talked about the fact that, you can talk about defense and the lack of pressure and a pass rush and things like that. You cannot lose the turnover battle, especially when it's that lopsided, and expect to win a football game in this league. It's just too difficult to do, and that's where they are right now. I think the good thing is they've been through this before, where they went through this massive turnovers, and they've been able to turn it around. But they've got to do that because, they were able to escape for a couple of weeks. Improbable win over the Bears, improbable win over the Chargers when the Chargers scored 5 consecutive times to end the game and the Lions still found a way to win. Didn't happen against Green Bay. So full credit to the Packers, and the Lions need to figure some things out before they get going this week.
Dan, I'm going to stick with you here. Is there a concern at all with Jared Goff and the fumbling issues, or is it just kind of a case-by-case scenario? Is there a concern in that regard?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, I think if he doesn't stop it, yes, there's a concern. And the reason I say that is if you go back to their start last season, Goff had interceptions, Goff had fumbles, Goff had a lot of turnovers, and then like a faucet, he just turned it off and went on that incredible streak where he didn't turn the ball over at all. And then we saw at the beginning of this year, again, when they turned it over, they had problems. When they didn't, they were winning games. So I think the answer to your question is, if it continues, yes, it's a concern, but we've seen him stop this before. So there's no doubt he's under a microscope. He'd be the first one to tell you that. He's got to figure out some way to protect that football. He's not a scramble guy. He's a guy that maybe steps up in the pocket, a couple of steps left or right. But when he does that, as he has said himself, he's got to make sure he protects that football. So, look, overarching concern for this team is turnovers and not being on the wrong end of that, because it's just too difficult for them to win. They don't have, in week-to-week basis, that kind of edge over other teams to where they can survive that. So, look, he's got the football more than anybody else, so it's going to start with him in terms of protecting it.
And all the quarterbacks kind of under the spotlight in that regard, from, Jared Goff to Justin Fields and Josh Dobbs. But I will say this, Jordan Love, when he played against the Lions, certainly kept the ball in check, didn't put himself in any sort of position to have a bad play, and they really took control. They seemed very confident, and I don't think this is something that we expected to see out of this young Packers team about 6 to 8 weeks ago. I mean, at that point, I was telling Lou, these guys were excited for a top 5 pick, and now that narrative has really shifted to say this Packers team is still very much in the playoff hunt. There's still a lot ahead of them, and their schedule is still very favorable. So things are feeling really good right now in Packerland. But again, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs will come to town, and they might bring them back down to earth. But I think we like the improvement that we have seen from Jordan Love in that department. The Packers right now, 0 in terms of the turnover differential. They've given away 12 and have also taken 12 as well. So speaking of the turnover differential, from Dan to now us here in Green Bay to, of course, Justin Fields, Lou. Is this a guy, in your opinion, who will show enough in the final 6 weeks of the season to save his job in Chicago? Had a couple fumbles there against the Vikings where it got a little dicey, but he was able to make those big plays down the stretch to help you guys win.
It was funny. I was on social media, Lily and Dan and Ahmad, after he fumbled it for the second time late in that football game on Monday night. And the majority of fans out there screaming, "I've seen enough. I can't stand it anymore. We need to go out and get Caleb Williams. We need to go out and get Drake May." And then what does he do? He completes a 16-yard pass to DJ Moore. By the way, I have been screaming all year long, target DJ Moore. Get him 10 to 15 targets a game. Finally, they did last night. And then the big pass, obviously. A couple of throwaways after the 16-yard completion to DJ Moore. And then he finds him in the middle of the football field, wide open for a 36-yard gain. It put Cairo Santos in position to kick that game winner. And suddenly all those fans who wanted to make Caleb Williams the number 1 pick in the draft, with the Bears taking on Carolina's pick, said, well, wait a second. We finally saw Justin Fields. We finally saw the Bears win a game because of Justin Fields. Guys, that was his first comeback. He had a couple of other comebacks earlier in his career, but one was more because of Roquan Smith. One was more because the Texans were just so pathetic. This was because, he persevered through the problems of the holding on to the football. By the way, that was his 7th turnover in the 4th quarter of football games this season. He didn't let it get to him. He bounced right back, had time in the pocket, got out of the pocket, found more, got in the position to kick the game winner. And now I think the jury is still out. Lily, we still don't know. He has 5 games to now prove that he belongs as the franchise quarterback in this town, which would then come with a massive new contract as we get ready for season 4 of his deal.
And Lou, I'm also curious here, though, with the situation that's going on in Carolina. They fire Frank Reich. They have, obviously, Bryce Young there. They bring him in thinking he's going to save the organization. But you look at the situation there and how dire it is. And does that kind of give anybody in Chicago pause to say, if we do move on from Justin Fields, that potentially could be an outcome? I know I'm speaking in hypotheticals here. Or is it just you get the best player available that could be a quarterback in Caleb Williams? Is there any sort of concern at all with what Carolina's going through, with what Chicago might be going through in the next couple months?
No, I don't think there's any current concern whatsoever. I mean, we've seen what Bryce Young's done. We've seen what C.J. Stroud. The only concern here in this town is, oh my gosh, should we have made the trade for the first pick last year, or should we have selected C.J. Stroud? And I think they made the right move because they don't end up with D.J. Moore unless they make that deal. In regards to what this franchise does next, this is my personal opinion. I believe that Justin Fields would need to go out and throw for 300 plus and 4 touchdowns in each of the 5 remaining games for this team not to select a quarterback with potentially the number 1 pick. Why? Because last year they had the number 1 pick and traded it. This year, again, with Carolina's pick, they could again have that number 1 selection. And I don't see, personally, just me, Ryan Poles putting himself in a position where he would again walk away from drafting potentially a generational quarterback with that number 1 selection. I think Justin Fields needs to do so much more. And guess what? Before he completed that 36-yard pass to DJ Moore, it was more of the same from Justin Fields. Can't bring the team back, hasn't done it, gives up the football too often when games are on the line. We will see over the next 5 weeks.
It will certainly be interesting. And let's stay with the quarterback talk now. Let's go to Minneapolis with Ahmad. And you talked about the pastronaut, Josh Dobbs, coming back down to earth the last couple of weeks. Has the kind of flair worn off from him at all? Or do you still believe that he might be the guy for you guys the last 6 weeks of the year?
Well, you always have to be careful when you're talking about stuff like this and when it comes to Minnesota sports and social media, because one moment they're in love with the quarterback or their favorite player. They're talking about Super Bowls years beyond. Everyone's talking about getting his jersey. Then after a game like that in the third quarter, they're like, bench him, bring back Jaren Hall, get in Nick Mullins, like bring somebody else in and bring this team to life. So it's always a roller coaster ride here in Minnesota. But obviously after the game, head coach Kevin O'Connell said they're going to have to evaluate Josh Dobbs in the 4 games he put on tape here for the Minnesota Vikings. He has 8 turnovers in those 4 games, 2 wins to show for that, 2 losses to show from it. So they're going to evaluate those games and then kind of decide what do they have internally with Nick Mullins and Jaren Hall. You know, when I was speaking to some players on the team the other day, they said they're confident with whoever goes out there as long as that player is playing confident. And I think for Josh Dobbs, he's still thinking a lot. Like that interception where he threw it to Jordan Addison, where it hit him right in the face mask. That's one of those balls where you just put it on him. Let your receiver go catch it and go make a run after a catch. Or the wide open pass Jordan Addison and Dobbs misconnected on, you know, later in the game. That's one you have to have, those type of plays. So, you know, the Vikings will have to just assess, you know, everything that they put on tape, see who gives them the best chance to win. But honestly, you know, Josh Dobbs did look bad last night, 4 interceptions. That's never a good thing. But I do think that when he has time to play, when he does understand this offense, and when he's being him and just trying to run the football, create extra things happen with his legs, I think that's when the Vikings are in good shape. So who knows who's going to play quarterback right now. I also think Kevin O'Connell didn't have a good game last night. He was challenged by Matt Eberflus in that Bears defense, and I don't think he stepped up to that challenge. That offense looked lifeless last night. There was little creativity. So I think he's also happy for the bye week to get Justin Jefferson back to kind of help expand things. So I think it's hard to judge when you don't have your number 1 wide receiver out there. So maybe they give Dobbs another week before pulling the plug, but I honestly have no idea just yet.
Well, you bring up a good point there. The Vikings activate Justin Jefferson from IR, which is a good sign for him. Do you think that there is going to be any sort of period, like a feeling out period with him and Josh Dobbs, knowing how well he knew Kirk Cousins on the field? And do you think that just his presence alone, regardless of not if they do need time in that relationship, how big of an impact will Justin be on the field for you guys?
Well, I think the type of talent Justin Jefferson has is one that's an immediate impact. But being a former player of myself, you know, playing college football, timing means everything when you're talking about wide receivers and quarterbacks and chemistry. And as we saw with Jordan Addison and Josh Dobbs last night, that end route was open, but he drilled him in the face mask. Justin Jefferson may be open, but their timing and chemistry may not be up to par just yet. So, you know, I think they're going to need some time. Whoever is playing quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings moving forward is going to need time line with just Justin Jefferson, TJ Hockenson, and every other weapon that they have, because none of them got all the reps that they needed throughout training camp because Kirk Cousins was there. But now he's gone down with that Achilles injury, so everyone is kind of trying to fill that void that Cousins left, and that's a big void to fill. So I think time heals all wounds, and I think the Vikings, that's what they need at the quarterback position. But obviously time is not on their side right now with 5 games remaining.
And of course, I guess the encouraging thing is that the offense feeling things out, but the defense played well for you guys despite the loss. And speaking of defenses, I want to go back to Dan in Detroit. And Dan, what's going on with the Lions defense? I feel like you guys kind of came out, and I mean, when they played the Packers at Lambeau, I mean, it was just taking Green Bay to town. But the last couple of weeks, it's kind of been lackadaisical on that end.
Yeah, and I would say this, credit Green Bay for a lot of that, because I think they just played a lot better on Thanksgiving Day than they did on week 4 when we played them at Lambeau Field. And that was a different quarterback that we saw. And to your point, Lily, give Love some credit. Hey, over 300 yards against the Chargers the week before, heck of a game against the Lions. So he's starting to show something. I think what they got going on in Chicago is fascinating. I agree with Lou. You need to draft one, because this is your shot. You may not get another shot. That is something we could sit here and talk about all day, because to me, it's the most important position in all the sports. To your question, look, there's questions about the Lions defense right now. They are not pressuring the passer. They've gotten the bulk of their sacks in 3 games this year. They don't have guys that are winning up front outside of Aleem McNeil and Aiden Hutchinson. Outside of that, guys are not winning their one-on-one battles. They're not getting to the quarterback. They're not making anybody uncomfortable back there. You give any quarterback in this league time to stand back there and throw, they're going to make you pay. Chargers, as I said a little bit earlier, scored 5 consecutive times to end the game against the Lions. In the game against the Bears scored on 5 straight drives. Luckily for Detroit, 4 of those were field goals, but even still, they're putting points on the board all the time. So the Lions are having a hard time getting off the field. It is a big topic of discussion here in Detroit, trying to figure out some way for them to generate a pass rush. And as you can imagine, why they didn't go out and trade for somebody at the trade deadline is always going to be a hot topic when you see Chicago go out and get Sweat, when you see Philadelphia and San Francisco, 2 teams that you're competing with, go out and get guys to play on the defensive line. So, yeah, Lily, there's no doubt that is something that needs to be shored up as they head forward in this season. We'll see what happens this week against New Orleans, but there's a lot of talk about this defense right now. They've been much better than they have been in the past couple of years. But this is the time of year where you need to be playing your best, and I think there's questions as to whether or not they're anywhere close to that right now.
Well, let's move on to next week then. After, Dan, you mentioned the Lions, you guys play the Saints. Derek Carr isn't, winning an MVP anytime soon, so there is an opportunity there for you guys to take command and kind of get back to playing that Lions brand of football on the defensive side. What, outside of a win, would you be most encouraged to see from Detroit after, coming up short on Thanksgiving?
It's clean football. It's getting back to who they are. It is running the ball on offense, Jared Goff utilizing that to then use play action and bring those receivers in. But it's a team that's built around that offensive line up front. That's where their assets have gone. They got to get back to that. They're at their best when they're running it with those 2 running backs, Montgomery and Gibbs, and then Goff is able to keep defenses kind of at bay and throw the football. That's on the offense. On the defense, find some way to start generating some takeaways, which is something that's been really difficult to do. Don't turn it over on offense. Find a way to start taking the ball away on defense. And let me say this. It's a big game for this football team because they got to go to Chicago the week after this, and that's not going to be easy. So you could be looking at some sort of losing streak here if you don't find a way to go down to New Orleans and get a victory. So, look, they're 8-3. They're in great shape. Certainly they're thankful that the Bears were able to beat the Vikings the other night. But it's about playing your best as you get into December, and we're going down the stretch here. And they haven't done that. So I think the talk in Allen Park this week is just about going back to things that you know you've already done, playing at a high level, playing clean, stopping the penalties, stopping the turnovers. If they can do that at a tough place to play down in the Superdome, they're going to have a shot to win. But if they go down there and play the way that they've played the past couple of weeks, they're going to make life really difficult on themselves.
And the future's still bright for this Lions team. You guys are 2.5 games up on the Vikings in the NFC North, and a pretty big gap there for you guys. And that's all, of course, thanks to the Bears. And Lou, I know you and the Vikings, you guys are both on a bye this week. I mean, this defense, I think, was much maligned, right? But they were playing kind of like the '85 Bears against Minnesota. I mean, is this something to hang your hat on after their performance against Josh Dobbs and company?
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, this defense has been playing well ever since Alan Williams was dismissed as defensive coordinator in Chicago, and Matt Eberflus took over the defense. Now remember, he was D coordinator in Indianapolis for 4 seasons before getting the Bears head coaching job. So he's double duty right now, but I'll tell you what, this defense has never been more aggressive, and he flat out, and Ahmad brought it up, he outcoached Kevin O'Connell last night with the defenses he called, with the pressure he brought on Joshua Dobbs. This defense is playing with a ton of confidence right now. They have forced 8 turnovers the last 2 weeks, 7 interceptions. So they went from the bottom of the league in picks right now to the top of the league. They're 3rd in the NFL in interceptions right now. And a lot of it is having to do with Montez Sweat. And we can sit and look at strictly only the sack numbers, and Sweat had a 1.5 sacks last night, but he is making others on that defensive line a force. A Gervon Dexter, who's a rookie, who's now settling in, feeling confident out there. A Justin Jones. He's allowing those linebackers that they spend so much money on. Tremaine Edmonds out of Buffalo. TJ Edwards, the former Eagle. Even Jack Sanborn, who's playing in the middle for the Bears right now. And the secondary, coming into the season, I thought the Bears secondary was actually its strongest position. And now they are able to cover men out there and understand that that front 4, at some point, they may not get to the quarterback, but darn it, they're going to put pressure on them. So defensively, this team is as confident as ever. Dan Miller, be careful in 2 weeks, because this D at home in Chicago at Soldier Field against the Lions after what happened the previous game in Detroit. I think even though they're a 4-8 team, I've got Eddie Jackson after the game yesterday talking about this team going on a run, going 9-8, winning out the rest of the schedule and making it to the playoffs. That's how confident they are right now.
Holy cow, I didn't think I would hear that from you guys in Chicago, but I love it. And Ahmad, quickly here, your thoughts. Vikings on a bye. Is there any sort of reset button that you guys have to hit to put Josh Dobbs and company in a better position to win? Or is it just, listen, we had a bad game. It's going to be, we'll have to find a way to bounce back during this week off?
I think the general manager, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, said it perfectly last night. T.J. Hawkinson was sitting at his locker, just kind of in a lethargic mood. He was down. You could tell he was down, just staring at his phone. He came up. He said, Kwesi gave him a fist bump and said, tough one. It'll be all right. We'll figure this thing out. I think the bye came at a perfect time. You guys know the NFL season is exhausting. It's grinding, going through the same routine each and every day, putting your body on the line, then having to get yourself ready to go. I think, the break came at a perfect time, and I think they'll regroup and be ready.
All right, one last thing before we do go. I kind of want to do this round robin style. One word to encapsulate what you guys are really thinking of moving forward with every team. It's going to be a fun segment here on First and North. Lou, let's start with you. One word for the Bears moving forward that's sticking in your mind right now.
Hope, hope, hope. Just be competitive these last 5 weeks. Seriously. In the positions that we all sit in, don't we just want competitive football from the teams we cover once we hit the month of December, and now with the season extended an extra week, a couple of weeks into January? The Bears gave Chicago hope for exciting football, even though, seriously, I hope Eddie Jackson's right and this team goes on a run, wins out the rest of the schedule and puts themselves in a position to possibly steal a wild card. I'm not sure it's going to happen. I'm not betting on it's going to happen, but at least be competitive. And thanks to a terrific defense, a defense, guys, that has turned around. A year ago, this team gave up more points than any team in the NFL. Its run defense was second worst. Right now, this defense sits at the top of the NFL. And Lily, you touched on it during the show. Is it bringing memories back of the '85 defense? Hey, arguably that was one of the greatest defenses ever to play in the NFL. So I'll never compare what we're seeing this season to the '85 defense. But at least this defense is giving this franchise a chance. is giving Justin Fields the opportunity to have good field position, make something happen, and potentially save his job these last 5 weeks.
I will say the last thing Packers fans want are the Bears to have the 85 defense back, especially when we do duel you guys at the end of the year. So it's been fun to watch. And Ahmad, what about you guys? The Vikings, 2 straight losses, 6-6, kind of right there in the playoff push. What's one word for you guys?
Security in multiple ways. Security. Ball security, quarterback security, and security from the defense. Last year, they were one of the worst defenses in the National Football League. Now they're a middle-of-the-pack defense. They need to keep giving the offense a chance to win games. The offense needs to have better ball security. We've talked about it time and time again. The Vikings are one of the league leaders in turnovers. They consistently put their defense in bad situations. Their defense consistently bails them out. So they need to have some security with that. And we're talking about going into the final month of the season, and a quarterback carousel is going on with the Minnesota Vikings. Get some quarterback security. Get somebody there that the team trusts, that they can rally behind and play complementary football. So that's my word here in Minnesota for last week and moving forward. Security in multiple different ways.
And Justin Jefferson coming back, a big security blanket, hopefully for this offense as well.
Yep.
And Dan, you guys in Detroit, I mean, a minor setback, I would say, against the Green Bay Packers. Everything's still ahead for you guys. What's one word for you?
Yeah, Lily, it's amazing what this season can do to you. You're 8-2, you lose a game, and people can start to question a lot of different things. So I would say that word is clean. Just get back to playing clean football. And that means eliminating the turnovers. That means being assignment sound. And that means getting back to communicating on the field, doing the things that they did when they were well, and stop committing penalties that give the other team life, that give the other team extra downs, that give the other team extended possessions. We've seen this Lions team do it. They're not good enough to win consistently if they don't. So the word that Dan Campbell uses a lot is the word that I'm stealing right now. It's clean. If I had a dime for every time that he's told me they need to play clean football in the 3 years that he's been here, we could go out and buy a meal right now. That's one thing he believes in. That's one thing coaches preach. They've got to get back to playing clean football, the kind of football where you're your best advocate and you're not helping the other team consistently. They do that, they'll get back to playing some pretty good football.
Yeah, -5 turnover differential right now, hoping to see that kind of move up for you guys in that regard. So clean, hope, and security. I'm going to say the word here for the Packers has to be confidence. When you look at what this team was doing 2 months ago, they were not playing confident. They were playing timid. You lose to the Raiders, you lose to the Broncos in games that were winnable, and they never put themselves in a position to win because they were playing tentatively. From the play calling to the execution, nothing really was going their way. And then this switch flips and they play confident against the Lions in Detroit on a short week with an injured team in a loud stadium at Ford Field. I've been there. It's tough to play in that environment. And this young Packers team goes out on the very first play of the game, and Jordan Love finds Christian Watson for a 53-yard hookup. 4 plays later, they score a touchdown, and they kind of set the tone for the game. That confidence is what I want to see this young team maneuver and really harness the last 6 weeks of the season. Because, again, outside of Kansas City, their schedule is manageable. And if they can play with the same confidence that they played with against Detroit, and they can make a run here later on in the season, they very well could still be very much in that playoff hunt. And I don't think that's something that fans here would have expected the Packers to be in 2 months ago. So things are trending upwards. Confidence is key for this young Packers team. It starts with their quarterback, and he certainly proved it the last month or so as well. So I'd love to see it. It's going to be a fun discussion on Week 13. We'll see if all that comes to fruition. But for Lou, Dan, and Ahmad, I'm Lily Zhao. Thanks for watching. First and North. We'll see you next week.